An interesting thing happened a couple weeks ago. I got an email from a guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's produced my old band's major label record. Now, when I moved to Atlanta in 1994, one of the purposes was to start a band and create music, find people to play with that I could create music with, and hopefully go out and tour, maybe get a record deal and go out and tour and record because I loved recording, even though I had no experience in it at the time. So, anyways, this guy that produced our record, the label really suggested that he was the one to produce it. And when you're a new band, you really have no choice, right? So, and we had made a record on our own already that was an excellent independent record that easily could have been put out as it is or just remixed and put out. But they wanted us to make a new record because that's how labels are. So we worked with this producer, and he had some personal issues that started happening right on the fourth or fifth day of the project. And eventually that led him into not showing up. Probably, I'd say a week into the project or so, he'd call in, "Oh, I'm not going to be there until noon." "Well, then I'm not going to be there until 4. "I'm not going to be there until 7. And then the day would go by and he'd never come in. And we had to cut the basic tracks, which most major label bands did. This is 1999. And the bass player and drummer went home. So just me and the singer out in Los Angeles at these studios. All these studios that we recorded at, we were at 2 different studios, and they were over $2,000 a day for studio time. Now, our singer Mark and I didn't really have any experience as engineers. We knew how to arrange things. We had been in studios because we'd recorded a ton of demos up till that point. And I had produced a few things on my own, but never as an engineer. So eventually, 3 months into this thing, one of the guys from the label came, and he had not heard any roughs or anything. And the producer got fired. Now, typically what happens is that your band gets dropped, and that's it. So all those years, me moving here in 94, searching for people to play with, finding a band, writing songs, making 100 demos, getting signed at 36, getting to make my first major label record, and our producer gets fired, and typically the band gets dropped then. But they didn't drop our band. We were on this label, London Sire Records. What they did is they hired somebody to come in and try and salvage the record. His name was Kevin Shirley, who's a great engineer, producer, and mixer. Kevin does a lot of records with Joe Bonamassa, for example, but he had worked with Black Crowes and Aerosmith back then. So Kevin finishes the record. Took about a month to mix it and fix it as best he could. And eventually, the record came out and we got dropped a few weeks after because all these mergers started happening, okay? Which then led me, because of that experience, because of that horrible experience of not knowing how to engineer and being basically held hostage by a producer, engineer that never showed up. And when he did show up, many times he would come in and he would just erase the stuff that we had recorded on our own with one of the assistant engineers. And I never wanted to be in that position again where I was beholden to someone else just because I didn't know how to move faders or what a preamp was or what a microphone was, right? So I started teaching myself producing. Well, a couple weeks ago, he wrote to me out of the blue. Now, I haven't talked to him since 1999. And he said, "I'd love to talk to you." We talked by phone, sent me his number. I said, "Great, give me a call." He called, and so it's been 21 years, right? So, or is it 22 years, 21 years? A long time. First thing he did was apologize for what happened. And I said, "You don't need to apologize, because had it turned out any other way, my life wouldn't be the same. I mean, none of the same decisions would have been made. I wouldn't have met my wife, most likely. Maybe I would have. I wouldn't have my kids. I wouldn't be here on YouTube making these videos if it weren't for the fact that he had these issues going on in his life that made him get fired from our gig. And what I thought was a terrible thing that happened, my one chance in a major label band, was ruined by someone else that I had no control over. But it made me develop the skills as a producer. It made me eventually, because of those skills as a producer, take those skills and start this YouTube channel. But it really goes back to another point in my life on a story that I told very early on in my channel, about 6 months into my channel, called Fortunes of Hard Work. And that story was about me not getting into college for music. Now, some people that watch this channel know this story, but many people do not know. When I was in high school, it was probably about March of my senior year, and maybe February. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to school for music. So, but I didn't know how you did that. So I picked 2 colleges to audition for, Ithaca College and Fredonia State University in upstate New York. And both of them had very similar requirements. Ithaca College, I wanted to be in the jazz program. So what you had to do is learn 3 classical guitar pieces from 3 different eras. Could be the Baroque era, the Romantic era, the Renaissance era, and you had to play the Segovia scales. Andre Segovia is one of the most famous classical guitarists of all time, really the inventor of the modern classical guitar. So I went to my guitar teacher at the local music store, Glen, who was a great jazz guitar player, and I said, Glen, this is what I need to do for college to get in. Okay, no problem. He grabs a Mel Bay, Mel Bay's simplified versions of pieces, and he didn't read the part about 3 different style periods, so it was 3 Bach pieces, but they were simplified pieces. So I go to my first audition at Fredonia State, and I go in, totally nervous, right? 17-year-old kid. And the guitar professor's not there. The violin professor's there. And he doesn't know anything about guitar. And they have this big reel-to-reel tape recorder, right? So he looks on the thing, he says, okay, well, play me your 3 pieces. And I play him the 3 pieces, and he looks at it, he says, well, these aren't actually from the different style periods. They're all from the same style period. Oh, well, play the Segovia scales. Now, he didn't know the Segovia scales, and I didn't know the Segovia scales, because I didn't even know what that was, and my teacher, Glen, didn't know. I said, do you know what the Segovia scales are? And he said, I think they're just 3-octave major, minor scales. And so he says, well, just play a 3-octave G major scale. So I played a 3-octave G major scale. Now, this is on tape, so how would you know whether I was playing the correct fingerings? This is really about the fingering combinations, right? So I figured, okay, yeah, no problem, Segovia scales. I have mental note, Segovia scales. Next week is my next audition. And I looked up what the Segovia scales were, and I started practicing them. I was like, okay, I think I can remember these. So I go to Ithaca College, and I go into the office number 13. My dad drives me down. I'm in a 3-piece suit. Any of you that follow me on Instagram know these ridiculous outfits that I wore back then and what I looked like. I probably had a mustache or something, right? So I go into this thing. I'm so nervous. And the professor there, Steve, he was in a really intense mood. He was an intense guy, great guy. He was one of the most important people in my life musically ever, Steve Brown. Oh my God, taught me so many things. First time meeting him, I'm there, nervous. I got my classical guitar. I play the first piece. He's like, what's that arrangement? I said, oh, that's Mel Bay Prelude in D minor. He said, well, that's not even the right, those aren't the right notes. That's not the right prelude. Okay, what else do you have? So I start another piece, another Bach piece. He says, well, that's from the same style period. Did you look at the requirements for the audition? I said, yeah, but I didn't know what they meant. He said, well, this means 3 different style periods. Renaissance, classical, romantic, 20th century. Okay, well, what other piece did you learn? So I played him this. I had a piece that I learned, a Scarlatti piece actually, that I learned off a record, Julian Bream record. He says, what's that? And I said, it's a piece I learned off a record. It's a Scarlatti piece. This is one of the ones, it's a 4th piece that I knew. And he says, how did you learn that? Do you have the music? I said, no, I just learned it off the record. Like, what else do you do? You want to know a classical guitar piece, you just listen to the record and learn it. He's like, well, those fingerings are totally messed up. I don't know that arrangement. Can you play the Segovia scales? So I kind of hacked my way through on my classical guitar, and I'm basically drenched in sweat. I said, well, I'm really auditioning for the jazz program. Okay, can you play a jazz standard? Let's play something together. Now, my mind goes blank. I'm so nervous. My dad's waiting outside the office thinking, okay, what's going on here? I can't think of any standards that I had learned with my guitar teacher, Glen. It's just my mind. I was so terrified. So Steve said, how about a blues? And I said, okay. And he says, what key? And I said, A. No jazz player plays an A. And Steve just looks at me like, A? And he goes over to the piano and he starts plunking out an A blues on the piano, right? And I'm trying to solo over it, and it's a disaster. So he kind of chuckles to himself and then comes back over, okay, well, you'll get your notification in the mail. And I said to him, I have a really good ear. I'm a really fast learner. Yeah, you'll get your notification in the mail. So 2 weeks go by, and the same day, I get a letter from Fredonia State University in Ithaca College. I was like, oh my God, here they are. I intercept them at the mailbox. I open the first one from Ithaca College. You've been rejected. And I am crushed. The second letter I open up, and I've been rejected also from Fredonia State. And in that letter was a letter from the track coach saying, Rick, you got rejected from the music school, so you can't come for music, but if you want to come and have a different major and run on the track team, then you can get in. So I wrote back and I said, yeah, I'll come as a history major. And I went and I got a scholarship for running track. Now, if you watch my Fortunes of Hard Work video, I tell the rest of the story about what happened because it's a very long, involved story. But I was devastated and I lied to my family about getting into college for music. I ended up going to Fredonia State for 1 semester. A freshman guitarist, Phil Sasso, taught me 6 pieces or so I could re-audition 6 weeks later to get back into Ithaca. My parents were like, why do you have to re-audition? You just auditioned and got in. Just because it's a new school year. Well, I audition and I get into Ithaca. And I realized that I was a much better player than pretty much any of the guitar players that were there. But in the first week of school, I went to the bass teacher there because I played bass in high school and I played for him. And he said, why do you want to be a guitar major? You need to be a bass major. And I played first chair in the orchestra of my high school. So I switched my major, and he said that had I auditioned as a bass major, I would have gotten in, really at either place. And I was literally devastated when I got those 2 rejection letters. I almost quit playing. I really almost quit playing. But 6 years later, I was a professor in the same office number 13. I had a desk in there. Steve put a second desk in and hired me to be a professor at Ithaca College, where I didn't get in because I couldn't play what the audition requirements required me to do. Now, you never realize what's going to happen in your life, how these things can open up new doors that you never would have imagined. Had I not had that experience of being completely humiliated, I never would have had the fortitude, the intensity to really buckle down and learn what I needed to learn over the next 6 to 8 months to improve my playing so that I could get into college, learn how to play classical guitar, learn these 3 pieces from 3 different style periods. So you never know what doors are going to be opened. Had Steve not rejected me, I wouldn't be here in front of this camera. Had our producer not had these issues that kept him from coming to the studio, and our band, might have done something, probably not, maybe I wouldn't have my wife and children and be here talking to you as well. So that's my story for today. I hope you guys get something from it, but it's an important story that I told early on my channel that I think a lot of people don't know. And I thought it was an important one to tell today. Thanks for watching.